Good morning. I know that Commissioner McDaniel is on her way. I know that Commissioner Potter is not likely to be here, but we are expecting certainly our other two commissioners here shortly, I think. But we'd like to go ahead and get started because we have three fairly busy topics for today. And we were just talking to, our fourth topic was Mark Owens and the chamber, so we were just working out, no, you're good. We're going to do it later. But we sort of talked through that we want to make sure we had time for the first three options, and we were doing a little schedule. So I apologize for our tardiness in getting started. Pleasure to have a number of the members of the Winston-Salem-Forsyth County School Board with us here today. And I'm not the greatest introducer, but I'll do my best to introduce them there. But we do have our chairman, Deanna Kaplan. Thank you, Deanna. I don't see Alex. Oh, he is. He's back in the back. I didn't see him when I was out there. Alex Bohannon is the vice chair. And we also have Susan Miller on the front. And we also have Richard Watts next. And we also have Sabrina Coons next. And we also have Travonia Gaither Brown. Very good. Brown Gaither, I apologize. I know Geneva well, and I should be saving Brown. I should be the first words out of my mouth. Thank you, Travonia. All right, I think we're ready to get started. So I'll call on our superintendent, Tricia McManus, and I think she'll be introducing Tommy a little bit.
Yep. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for giving us time today to talk through our budget request for 24-25. Tommy Kranz is with me. He's going to be standing up here, and when we get to question and answers, we'll both probably tag team it. The presentation, I'm going to go quickly through some slides. It's a lot of slides. I know you all have it, and you'll have time to debrief after. But before we begin, and I know you already introduced our board, but I wanted to thank them. We've had a lengthy process, deep dive into very detailed budget items, and they have been instrumental in giving us recommendations and helping us prioritize what we needed to bring forth in our ask, what we needed to look for other ways to fund, and so they've been critical to this budget that we're bringing forward today. So thank you to them. And just thank you to our county. I know that you've been so supportive of our request. You have been just a partner in helping us think through many things over the years. And so we thank you all. We thank you all very much. And for being just as committed as we are to having the best teacher salaries in the state. And I know you are just as committed. So we are going to jump in and get started. Also, Tommy and his team have worked very hard. I mean, these numbers, we've been looking at numbers probably since January, like just weekly, making sure that we were on target when we came forth with this request for next year. So with that, we'll jump right in. I'm going to skip through the table of contents. You all have the book, again, that you'll be able to take through. We always start our request with our district vision and mission, which has not stayed. It's been in place. It has not changed. It's been in place for the last 4 years of our strategic plan. And we ground everything we do in making sure that all of our schools are engaged in high-quality, relevant learning experiences. And so you'll see that throughout this request. It's also grounded in our strategic plan goals. But what we've done beyond that is we've taken all of our requests and all of our budget items and have put them into 5 investment priority areas. Obviously, these support the district and mission, and these support our strategic plan goals, but these are the areas that we are asking that we are asking for funding in within our budget, and that's core instruction, which obviously includes all things teaching and learning, all opportunities within our classrooms. Those are CTE classes. Those are just everything related to instruction and great instruction in our classrooms. Well-rounded education, that is all things that provide students with additional experiences so they feel connected to school. So that might be athletics, arts. That might be additional opportunities, field trips, things that get kids clubs. So all things that give students a well-rounded, not just academics, but all things education. Behavioral and mental health is a third category. And that includes all things that are, social workers, mentors, all things that help our students around behavioral and mental health. And then employee retention, that's where you'll see, different types of bonuses that might be in there, professional development, teacher leader opportunities, all things related to really attracting and retaining great employees. And last but not least, efficient operations, and that is related to our buildings, related to technology, and so all of our investments are related to these priority areas. And the next part of the book will just be the letter that kind of outlines those areas. I'm not going to spend time on that because you'll be able to read that. So, started this year just like last year with some student data, just so you can see where we are with student enrollment and other pieces of information. Also some achievement data, and I'll explain all of that as we go through these slides. So you can see that right after the pandemic, we took a dip, and then 21, 22 went back up in enrollment. It's a little bit of a decrease as we went into this school year, but you can kind of see where our trends have been in close to the 52,000 range the last couple of years. Here are the demographics of our student. This is the racial makeup of our student body. And so you can see over time from 2015-16 to now what the racial makeup looks like for us. Here are students that are being served through exceptional education programs or services. They're receiving services through an IEP. And so you can just see over time those numbers have increased, I think, by about 800 students for all those years, almost a 10-year span. And then also students being served through multilingual learner services. This one is a large increase of about 3,000, close to 3,000 students who are being served now through multilingual learner services. All of this is just to show you over time where our investments need to go, and it's based on making sure that we are actually meeting the needs of our students, of all of our learners. You can see here with our economically disadvantaged percentages, we are having another increase. We put a note at the bottom of this to show you these percentages are defined by students deemed eligible for national school free and reduced lunch programs. And so those numbers, and this also, so we have also increased the number of schools that receive free breakfast and lunch, which is CEP. We this year have 64, and next year we'll be at 69 of our 81 schools that all students receive free breakfast and lunch. And again, these numbers, I know that was asked last year, these numbers come from students that actually apply, that receive, their families receive federal assistance or government assistance in a multitude of ways. And so that's where these numbers come from. And so we receive those numbers from the state, and then those numbers then are how CEP schools are identified. So I think this is just to show that we continue to increase in our percentages of students that are eligible. Now I'm going to get into a little bit of our data, and this is because what I want to show is that we know that we took dips after the pandemic. 2019 data is pre-pandemic. 2021 is post-pandemic. 2020, there was no data. There were no assessments given. So if you start to look at our data, we are on a path to recovery. And if you look at that, you can see in the last column, we had 5% and 6% average gains in most areas. We have a couple of areas that are flat in English and math, and those we have very specific plans to improve those. But this is just showing we are on this upward movement. And you can see that with graduation rate, which last year we did celebrate the highest graduation rates that we've had. So again, we're moving in an improved direction here. It's about continuous improvement. This is chronic absenteeism data, which the blue bars are showing students with no attendance issues based on this definition of chronic absenteeism. So in 18-19, before the pandemic, 81% of students really did not have any attendance issues. They were in school 90% of the time, which is what that means. If you can see, that dipped, but over the last 3 years, we are bringing that up. And I will tell you that our social workers, our CARES team members, there have been, these have been important roles in really shifting how we think about attendance. And I can talk about that more a little bit later. So again, we're moving in the right direction. These next slides, and you can take them with you and analyze them, but there's a reason for these. This was a study out of Harvard and Stanford universities that was released a few months ago, and what it shows is that our school district, this is a national average right here, a national comparison. We took a big dip post-pandemic, so we decreased a lot in our data post-pandemic. But what this is showing is that compared to other districts across the country, we are recovering faster than many. And if you look at and this is in math, and if you look then at across in North Carolina, we are also recovering faster than many of the districts in North Carolina. If you look at reading, this shows you where we are in our recovery, post-pandemic recovery, and what it's showing in these numbers is that last school year was that year that really pushed us in our recovery. And there are reasons for that, and I'll explain that in our ask for this year. And then this shows how we compared to other districts in the state. Now, these next two charts are going to show you, I kept bubbles, but I kept the bubble charts because these charts can be very confusing. But what we did was we actually just did North Carolina districts and put the names of the districts. So this shows you in math where we actually sit with recovery. We're at the top in math for recovery, post-pandemic recovery. And in this next one, you can see where we fit. We are at the top and put recovery with reading. So the dot shows where we fell compared to other districts in North Carolina. So we are proud of the work we've done. And I will tell you, the ESSER funding that we received to get to that place with our data, to be at the top of recovery, was critical to that. And so in just a minute, we'll talk more about that. But I think it's important to know that all the things that we did during that time to support schools, to give them resources they need, are an instrumental part of why that recovery has happened like that. Here is some staff data. You can see our positions funded. We are in 23-24, we funded less. The spike in positions was really because of ESSER. We know that it's people, not programs, that really help make the biggest difference. And so we did add people with ESSER, knowing that we would have to reduce those numbers post-ESSER. And so you can see where we are in 23-24, and you'll probably see for next year a few more reductions. Here is our years of experience by teacher. I think what's exciting about this is that 3,000 of our 4,300 teachers, over 3,000, have 6 to 30 years of experience. I think of course, we always want to attract new teachers. As people decide to retire, we need to attract new teachers, but it's very important to us that we retain our experienced teachers. That experience is critical. And so I think this is very promising that we have 3,000 of our 4,000 teachers with 6 to 30 years of experience, and you can see where they fall in each of those categories. So funding sources and uses, we include this every year, and so this is not new, but it kind of shows you where we sit with our different funding sources. And so this first one, I don't know where the S went on that state public school. Not sure where that S went, but that should say state. But you can see where we get what percent of our funds are state funds versus local versus federal. And so that's what that slide is showing. Some of the expense descriptions that make up those items within that slide. And then you can see this. These were and these are all based on 2023, which are what we actually spent. That's the last year we know our actual dollars spent, and so that's what this slide shows you. These are all three funding sources together. You can see what we spend on salaries, charter schools, capital outlay, supplies, materials, purchase services, and benefits. This one then shows your state funds and how much are spent through the state. Again, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this. You can read these things later. And this one shows federal funds. This does not include ESSER. And then you can see in the last 3 years, we had these $195 million of ESSER 2 and 3. You heard when I came in a few years ago that we received $215 million. That would have been with ESSERs 1, 2, and 3. But you can see in 2 and 3, $195 million is what, as we go into next school year, we will no longer have at our fingertips. But we've planned for that. We planned ahead knowing that those dollars were going to be here for 3 years. This slide shows what we get now, so you know what we get in Title I, Title II, Title IV. We put this slide in here because when you think about how do you fund your priorities? We're not just talking about local dollars. We're talking about state dollars. We're talking about grant dollars. We're talking about Title I, Title II, Title IV. We're talking about all these different funding sources. And so we did not approach this as Esther's going away, let's come to our county and put it all on local. That is not how we approach this. We looked at every single revenue source or budget source that we had, and we figured out how can we pick that up? What is working the most, and how can we continue doing that? And so I'll just give you an example of that. You know, our graduation rates have increased. Graduation coaches were a big part of that. So schools like that is being picked back up. Schools that have Title I are picking those roles up, many of them with Title I funds. So when something was working, we might not have been able to come forward and say, we want to keep all this. We know we couldn't have done that. But there were other ways that schools would be able to keep some of those resources. So this is just showing you the impact of federal funding. And then you've got our local. This shows you again our local dollars and where we spend our money in local dollars. The one that says transfers is the charter school line. And then again, the money that, so when you think about salaries, when you think about charter schools, utilities, custodial, maintenance, all that, and then employee benefits, you really only free up about $10 million that's there to make decisions. And so we knew going into this budget, if we were going to find other funds within the local dollars, we had to do something different. And there's one section of this that I'm going to show you some of the things that we've done to manage our funds so we could free up more dollars to do some of the things we wanted to do. So it would have been easy to come forward today and say, we need $80 million. We knew that would not go well, probably. And so we basically are going to show you what we did to try to absorb some things and what we actually absorbed within our own management of the funds so that we could come forward with a modest request today. All right, so that's another slide that shows that, the local fund expense. This is just showing you how many grants and how many millions of dollars we have in grants. We are continuously writing grants to try to continue to support initiatives, efforts, teaching and learning in our schools. And so right now, we have 124 competitive grants that we are still open. These are grants that we might have received 2 years ago, but they're still like in their third year, and that includes like Wallace Foundation, or it might be TSLP. But we have a grants team that honestly does incredible work. And just this year alone, we have 17 new grants for $1.3 million. So we consider that, you know, an important part of what we're doing is just continuously try to find funds to support the work we're doing. So now to share very quickly with you what I just, our priorities, so you can see a little bit more detail about our investment priorities. So if you look at those 5 areas we talked about earlier, core instruction, well-rounded, behavioral mental health, employee retention, and efficient operations, this shows you what we spend in those categories. And so some of the larger expenses, like when you think of core instruction, teacher salaries that are on local dollars are in that line item. So when you think about why is that line more than the others, it's because people that support different parts, teachers also support well-rounded, teachers also support behavioral and mental health, but really we put their salaries that are paid on local in the core instruction line item. But this is just to show you where we're spending our funds. Well-rounded education, or in our request to you, how much is being spent on each category. The well-rounded and behavioral health, I think those go together, because when you think about students being connected to school, having a sense of belonging, wanting to come, how we improve the attendance results, how we improve our academic outcomes, those two things go together, because well-rounded is the extracurriculars, the arts, the clubs, the field trips, all those exciting opportunities that get me connected to school. And then behavioral and mental health are really specific around exactly what that says, behavioral health, mental health, which comes in the forms of social workers that are licensed therapists, counselors, mentors, all of those things. So this is just a breakdown. And if you look at the next 2 slides, they break them down even more just to show you what some of those things are in our request, and that we are supporting with local funds. And so if you look at, I'll give you an example, behavioral and mental health, you can see that in our request, we've asked for additional social workers and additional nurses. If you look to the right of that in non-personnel, we have counseling services, student mentoring programs. We've got contracted services for students with 504 plans. There's a lot that has gone into this budget that you won't see in the request, but we wanted you to see how we spend the local dollars. You can see that with employee retention and efficient operations as well. If you look at employee retention, we've obviously asked for more money this year. You'll see that in our ask. But we also do a lot around non-personnel that costs money, like professional development, support for new teachers. We have some programs, grow your own programs, that are really getting us some great talent into our schools, like our teacher residency program. We're one of 3 districts that is able to license our own teachers in the state. We qualified for that. That costs money to do that because it's professional development, but it keeps them from having to pay the amount you have to pay to get this done at the university level. So all of these things are part of our local budget request.
Interrupt you with a real quick question.
Yes.
On the footnote for all of these charts, are these FY24 numbers? They're not, because I'm trying to understand,
Yeah.
maybe approximated for 24-25 projections. So are these 24-25?
Yeah, these are part of everything in our budget that is part of our 24-25 budget request.
So these are numbers that reflect 24-25?
Yes. Right, Tommy? Yeah, they're projections.
Starting in this
Yes.
section, going back.
All right, and
Yes.
starting in debt service is not at all in here, I take it?
No, sir.
Okay, all right.
All right. So moving on. So this is the last section before I get into our request, and this is where I wanted you to see where we have freed up dollars to be able to do some of the things that we've needed to do that we did not have to put in our budget request. And so some of those, vacancies, now our goal would be to fill them all. But Tommy has looked historically and has been conservative in this number. But basically, we've over time have had some vacancies that have resulted in money for the district that you can then reallocate to other things. And we'll talk about what that looks like. Interest and income, fines and forfeitures, these are all indirect cost revenue at the total of about $8 million. These are also part of for next school year. So these are the projections. Now, the numbers, if all of our vacancies get filled, which is we're hopeful for that, our trend does not show that will happen because you have vacancies in every area. You've got child nutrition, you've got bus drivers. We're not talking just about teacher vacancies. We're talking about across-the-board vacancies of a large school system. So if you look then at central office eliminations, we over time have been making reductions in these positions, and we're not doing that by having people lose their jobs. We're doing this through attrition, and so these positions were positions that were on this past school year's budget, which will not be on next year's budget request. So we have freed up $1.2 million in those positions, and we're going to continue to do that as we think about freeing up dollars to do things that are most impactful to our students. So these are savings. This is savings from management of dollars, and this is where Tommy is able to do this. Looking at where are people being paid, where are our most expensive people being paid, least expensive, and so his management of the funds and decision-making on a daily basis has allowed him to free up about $2 million. So with that, we have been able to free up, as we think about going into next school year, and again, these are all projections, it's about $11 million. So had we not done that, we would have needed to ask for more, but this has been an important part of what we're doing. So what are we doing with some of those dollars? Last school year, we added a transformation bonus. We have tiered our schools into tier 3, 2, 1. Schools that need the greatest support are in tier 3. And those are schools that we give additional funding to. We have a tiered system of support. Well, those teachers received bonuses to go to those schools, those teachers and leaders. And so that was $3.9 million. That is something we've taken on ourselves and did not add that to our ask. We have contract increases with our SRO this year, and we're not asking more for that. We're going to be able to actually cover that, absorb that. Substitute cost. That is something that we spend a lot of money on based on absence. The state does give us some dollars. We are able to put some on federal dollars. So if a teacher is paid out of Title I, you can put their substitute costs on Title I. But in general, we spend about $4 million on substitute cost, really out of local dollars. Classified local service longevity. This is what we did last year to address compression with our classified employees. It was a first part of getting them addressing some of their issues around compression. So we have absorbed that into the budget. A couple things that we did last year with ESSER that we felt were really important to continue, and we didn't want to just end them. We're front office parent liaisons that are bilingual. This is important to us. If you saw the percentage of students that are receiving multilingual services, their families need to be able to communicate with our schools. And so we felt the need to continue that even without ESSER. So you can see that there. We have student mentors and cares team that we've kept in the budget. These student mentors are assigned to students at really our middle and high schools, and they are assigned to students that need additional support and just a regular adult to check in with. This is a prevention strategy as part of the work of our code. It's a prevention strategy. And so that we felt was important. The CARES team have done work where they go out into the community. They work very closely with school social workers and other school staff. They work very closely with our area superintendents. I see them everywhere. Everywhere I go, I see them out in the community trying to get kids where they need to be, trying to make sure that our kids have access. And so that's another 1.2 we've absorbed. And then we are going to expand middle school sports because when you think about well-rounded, we want to have more options. And so next year, we'll be kicking off flag football at middle school. And so that's about 40,000. And we want to have that. That's been absorbed. So these are things that we have figured out, how are we going to sustain that over time next year and beyond. And so we didn't put 11 million more in our request to you because we figured out a way to do that internally. And so now to get to our request to you. Here's our request, and then we'll open up. Tommy and I will both be here to answer questions. So these are things that are in the request that we feel are very important. They're connected to our investment priorities, but we could not, based on our management, actually add these in as well. And so this is why we bring these requests to you today. This first page, if you see the top number, that's what we received last school year. That's what we're starting with, 163,996,529. And so this first item is if the state does give the 4% raise, this is how much it would cost for those paid on local dollars. So that would be about a 2.4 million expense, and that does include benefits. It's that 295,000. If those go up more, that might need to be more. If the raise is less, then that number could be less. So it just really depends on what the state decides there. But we put it at 4%, and so that's $2.4 million request. The next page. So again, these are broken up into our investment priorities. Employee retention is a big priority. We want to have our teachers paid in our school district at the top of all in the state. And we would love the state to take that on, obviously, but in the absence of that, we know that we rely on support from you all and any way that we can free up dollars to do more for our employees. And so what you see in this area is you see teacher supplements. For our teachers to be at the top, and that means we're competing with Wake and Charlotte, just to let you know who we would be competing the most with. We need to get them to about a $2,000 more supplement. Right now, we are 7th in the supplement at the state compared to all districts in the state. And so we've got money that our board last week, approved to take what we have left in Article 46 right now, which is about 4.6 in the reserve in Article 46 that's sitting in our reserve. Our board did approve to give that to employees. We know that when we give that out to employees for next school year, that will be about $800 to $1,000 increase in their supplement. So we know also after next year, we would need to absorb that and continue it every year, or it would be fluctuate. They'd get that for 1 year and not. So Tommy, that will be part of our future when we free up dollars, when we figure out savings. We're going to have to continue that on our end. What we're asking here for you all, we know that sales tax is not necessarily increasing. So this would be the county, if this approval happens, it would be you all contributing another $5 million. And that would take us up in the top 3, tied in the top 3 with supplements. So that would be that. Classified, we want to give our classified employees, again, we want to keep taking them up. If the 4% raises pass, classified will get 4%, plus we want to give them another 2%. We keep, wherever we can, just trying to keep moving classified salaries higher, in addition to continuing the local longevity that we already have accounted for. And so that would be about a $500,000 just for 2% additional pay. for those on local dollars. And then the master degree supplement, this is something that went away, and our teachers have been asking, could we bring this back? And these are not just any master's degree. These are master's degree that are connected to the work that they are doing. And so that is about $1 million. So that employee retention is that first block. Core instruction and mental health. We want to continue our work. We hired actually 30 more social workers through ESSER, and that has been very helpful. When you look at those attendance numbers that are the chronic absenteeism is starting to decrease, kids with no absentee issues is starting to increase. Our social workers have been doing so much around attendance. And I'm not talking about from a punitive standpoint. I'm not talking about a child's absent and now you do something with a court system. We're talking about intervention. We're talking about meeting with families. We're talking about a campaign, attendance campaign to get kids in school. There's a lot to that. They've been instrumental in that. Some schools have been able to, they've requested to use Title I funds to get a social worker full-time or to pay for additional social work. So this request of 10 would be very impactful. Between that and those that have used other funds or even trade-in of positions to keep a social worker would get us closer to that 30 that we stopped with due to ESSER. And then the nurses, I know that we partner with the health department for nurses. Last year with ESSER, or the last 3 years, we were able to hire 5 more. And like lowering the ratio of nurses to school is really important. And I'm sure that in the county's budget, if that's already going to be included and we can keep lowering that ratio, that would be awesome. And then pre-K. So pre-K, we've at the ending of Project Impact, we had to figure out how to continue supporting pre-K classrooms. This supports about 11 classrooms. We are taking on other classrooms with Title I, but we also need additional support for those 11 more classrooms to be able to fund pre-K. So that's 1.3. Efficient operations and safety, the 2.7 is for custodial services. And we've been, for a period of time, we've been using contracted services. And our buildings, those services, and I'm not sure if you all use contracted services or not, but contracted services have not, they have been problematic over time as far as the quality and the cleanliness. And so we've even changed services, and it still continue. They're getting better, but it continues to be, we've put a lot of measures in place to get the buildings up to standard. And we have a standard of expectation, and we are working with the organization that we have now to get up to standard. But this 2.7 is there because we have an outpouring of people that would love us to bring these services back in-house. And to do that, it would cost, for half of the year, it would cost 2.7. We know that's an expense, but if we were to go back to in-house services, the total amount of that would be about $4 million more a year. So this is for half the year because we have our current contract till December. As we continue to analyze, that amount gives us the opportunity that if we did want to bring it, and the feedback is coming honestly mostly from school staff, mostly from honestly mostly from school staff that are saying that we really want to take this on so that our buildings can be up to par, and they believe that the internal services would allow that to happen if they were our own employees. So that's that amount. And then bus and school radio upgrade. Our buses, radios right now are, they need a complete overhaul and upgrade. It's a safety issue. There are times that we cannot hear, like our bus, where the bus drivers are calling into on the radios, where the radios are calling bus drivers, you can't hear sometimes, and it is a safety concern, and that is a large expense. Again, we're looking for grant funding for that, but in the event, it would cost us $1.7 million to change the radios on our buses. So all of those things related to our investment priorities are a total of an additional request of $20,148,036 for a total request going into 24-25 of $184 million. So with that, as you all know, that's why we're requesting these funds. That is why we're requesting these funds. But we will open up now for questions. And Tommy, Is there anything I left out, Tommy, that you want to make sure to say? So now we'll open up for questions.
You ready?
Yes.
This is the first time that we've looked at this today. but
Yes.
Good presentation, and I do want to say, and Ms. McManus can attest, I sent her an email back when the test scores came out. Read an article in the Charlotte Observer, gave a great chart of some of the comparisons, and the 6%, basically, the other urban districts in this state basically increased, they grew by about 3% in student performance in reading and math. And Winston Forsyth was twice that, which is really great. And I certainly,
Thank you.
compliment you on that.
We have great people.
I do, as I've also indicated to her, is that was a measure of growth, and now to grow on top of growth, statistically, expectations probably, even with great performance, will not be at that level to go on. But if it, that's hitting a home run. If you can get two, that's great. It'll be the second one that got a different pitcher, different rules in this one. But that's really good, and that's great. All right, so a lot of good things and a lot of good data. I appreciate the format. I couldn't digest it quite as fast as you talk, but I pretty much got it. I pretty much got it, and a lot of good pieces to that, and I really liked it was a clean presentation. In terms of these expense items, I do have a couple of questions, and
Okay.
I suspect others will want to join in. And while they're thinking more, I want to go on a couple of these things. I do think state pay is going to be at least 4. Been I actually had some conversations with some other folks about that, and could be more, and I understand the issue on that. Your item that's in that list of increase in taxes and benefits costs due to change in rate, one thing I do know is that the retirement match for the first time in 22 years. We went through this crazy hiatus in the mini recession of 2001, where the state match and retirement went to 0 for everyone, state and locals. That's a little hard to imagine, but it has increased every year since that point. And then actually, this is the first year it actually declined. First year in 22, it declined about 1%. It was about 0.96% on that number. So in your budget, that's a fair amount of money. And so I'm curious what this $295,000 increase is, where that came from.
From that is at the time we prepared the budget, we didn't have any kind of information like you're giving me right now. So the growth that took place last year on the retirement of 0.5, we did the exact same. The same thing with the growth in the health insurance. And so based on last year's presentations and the discussions we had, I broke down the cost so that if the retirement didn't go up, or like you're talking where they're going to eliminate it, then it would be, that number goes down pretty much to almost 0.
Say that last sentence
Okay,
again.
I broke it down into 2 pieces. So you have the top
You
being
look at
the
health insurance
2.1,
increases, which there were some increases that I recall.
and I haven't seen anything on
Or
my
at least
side.
proposed.
But that, on both the retirement and health insurance, it assumed it had the same growth this year for next year as we had last year for this year's impact.
Good. Well, knowing and just and I think my colleagues here on the commission know that I just spent 2 months in Mount Airy kind of shepherding some issues
Right.
with their budget. That's why I knew it went down 0.96, because went through this present preparation for them. And I probably think that number needs to be updated. In your big request, it's a fairly small amount, but I think that clearly the 0.96 has been out there.
Right, so
reduction.
Well, we hadn't seen it, but it'll drop our number. But it will drop, the 295 will be obviously lower.
That's why I asked the
We'll
question.
fix
All right.
that. We'll
This
fix
is
that.
why the question got asked.
Yeah.
We'll fix it.
Yeah. The other, and I appreciate your commitment to teacher salary. I think it's an issue, and we can talk more in some other ways about that. But I do want to talk some about and I appreciate your value in nurses and social workers. I would like to know, of those 15 positions, basically, how many of those were funded with ESSER last year? I'm assuming all of them.
Correct. All of them were.
Right. The computer refresh, everybody in this room knows that you got to replace your technology, and when you wait forever, you have huge costs, and school districts typically get out of sync, and you end up with a lot of things wearing out at the same time, instead of a reasoned, steady approach of basically, here's a refresh cycle.
Yes.
I'm curious what your refresh cycle might be, and whether this is part of that, or is this catch-up, or whatever, because that's a fairly large increase on top of what I'm sure you already have in some regard. So it would be helpful, don't need it today, but it would be helpful to see what your refresh cycle is.
Absolutely.
Total. And what's built into your refresh cycle. Because there is a lot of technology, and it changes every day. Some of it's getting cheaper, some of it's getting this, that, and the other, and it'd be nice to see what that is, because the assumption, some things, if you're teaching and you're in the, and you're the CTE business arena and whatever, you got everything top drawer. That when you're doing a lot of other kind of things, you can be like most of us at home, we can deal with some older technology for a while, but you can't let it go forever. But so essentially, their needs are different, depending on what you're using the technology for. And I'd love to see a little more detail on that, because that's a big increase.
Absolutely. We will send you, so this is part of our refresh. We used ESSER the last 3 years, and this is then the refresh cycle. So it's not new, well, it is going to be new because it's refresh, but it's for both student Chromebooks and we have a complete plan for when we would update those, from when kids would get them, at what grade level, to when they would get a new one, at what grade level. There's an entire plan. We can send you all that plan, but this $4 million is for student and staff, and it is part of the refresh cycle.
Yeah, and it may be something for consideration that the refresh cycle, in the post-ESSER world
is longer period of time.
May have to be longer.
We actually,
may have to be different.
this number was actually higher, and Kevin, we said, let's go a year longer, or 2 years longer before things are not dying, but we can just push the envelope a little bit. And so this number came down from our original number of what the refresh should be. But we will get you guys, we'll send a separate PowerPoint that shows you our refresh cycle. Again, if we don't get that funding and we can't find that funding, we're going to have to extend by 1 more year or something. But the refresh is really important for our employees to have machines that are working and our students to have Chromebooks that are working. So we'll get that to you.
Right. In the pre-K part, I do want to ask a little bit about Project Impact. If my memory serves me correctly, Project Impact never funded an actual classroom. It funded a lot of school, before school started, particularly for 4-year-olds, getting kind of this boot camp to get them ready. That was one of the efforts. And a fair amount of training, as I recall, in fact, a lot, I think. And I'm curious about, we've had a lot of discussion at this level. About the pre-K was a big ARPA project with through Smart Start. You're very aware of that, and needless to say, very important issue. I'm kind of curious. I'm more. It's kind of. I probably don't. I'm just.
Yes.
From what I know, I'd say that's not an impact replacement. The question is, if it's 11 classrooms, in addition to what you already have, and again, if this is an ESSER replace, it'd be nice to know that too. But because I think that is, it's important, and there is this. This huge matrix, if you will, of who's funding pre-K.
Yes.
As a part of it. So I'd probably like to know more about that, and that gets into some bigger issues community-wide. It gets into how many seats are available, there's no doubt about it. The state, they've done a better job, but they need to be pressed. If you don't request slots, which are the state-funded NC pre-K slots, which you all, in fact, got to house and use, if you got the space for them, those requests need to be made, because what I learned getting into this is that there are some reasons why our numbers are a low percentage at the state level, and one of those reasons, not the most important, but one of those, we weren't requesting the slots. And if you don't request them, you don't get them. So as a result, we've gotten into this big hole.
Yeah.
And I think that DHHS in North Carolina needs to be pushed.
Yeah,
And
I
they need to be
agree.
pushed on that. And if you've got that many slots available, say 15 times 11, then there needs to be NC pre-K requests that are pushing them. You won't get all those, but that envelope needs to be pushed. If the requests are there, there's a real argument for why the state has taken first come, first served and allows Guilford to have 60% of their eligible kids, and we have 30.
Yeah.
There's no excuse in that from the state level.
Yeah. I think
And-
part of ours, Dr. Martin, too, is we've been working to get all of ours licensed, because that is another, like your facilities
Yep.
up to par, and so we've been doing that so we can request those seats. That has been part of the problem, that not all of our classrooms have been licensed, and so we are also doing that at the same time so that we can request those seats. And I think something that would be helpful, and tell me if I'm wrong, but would be to show you all, like, over time, how we've been funding pre-K. We have that data. Like what's coming out of NC pre-K, what's coming out of Title I, what did come out of ESSER. This is a replacement for that. And so what's coming
it
out
might
of
be.
what? So I think we will show you a history. What are we getting? How many seats do we have open? We've increased our seats, our enrollment in pre-K, but we do still have some open seats. But that 11 are current classrooms. These are not additional classrooms. We are, again, Project Impact was funding classrooms. So it was funded. So when that ended, so I want to show you, let me send you all a chart that very clearly outlines who's been funding what for the last, we'll go the last, 5 to 7 years? Would that be helpful?
Yeah, if you got it, that's
Okay,
good.
okay.
Yeah, and that'd be, in fact, from a sort of a forum for that, I doubt that everybody is interested in all that background, but if we could do that so that we had sort of this
Yes,
optional
absolutely.
opportunity to learn that
Okay.
that would be great.
Okay.
That's helpful. And that leads us to talking about custodial services. Now, I recall in last year's request, there was a similar number like this, and I do want to clarify that obviously when we're done and say, well, this is what we have put in our budget, it's up to you all to figure out how to use it. We're not line iteming your issues, but you have, just like in the refresh cycles, those are your, you got to make the hard choices on
Yes.
that. But the question on the custodial service, I remember there was a number that was provided last year, and so I don't know if you spent some of that money, you spent money last year on that or not. I know you requested it. I don't know whether you spent it.
We did. That was the contract increase last year. So there was a contract increase. We started with a new company to increase standards, to staff it, to get all the equipment. There was an increase on last year's budget. And that was through our contracted services. I remember that request, and it was, yes.
So now on top of that, which was, my memory on that was in the 2 million plus range. So if I heard you correctly, we're talking about an annualized over nearly $5.5 million increase over top of the $2 million increase you had last year, plus that you're looking at to bring this in-house. And I think, I guess one thing I did learn in my little time in Mount Airy is that there's a lot more state money that's actually in custodial earmark. It's not a schedule, it's a lump sum. There's a lot more than a few things have changed in 11 years, and that's one of them. And there's a pretty good hunk of state dollars, which, to the extent that's covering your needs, that some of the big, $15 an hour minimum threshold got into some state funds. What it does not do is address your compression issues when you started it. It does not do that. And seriously, I mean, Mount Airy's they're making increments like they had an increment of $6 a month. Picture that now. But they at least said you're not making the same amount. I mean, they did better. They're working on the same challenge. But I was a little surprised how many custodians of their custodians were state funded. That was a surprise. And I'd be interested in knowing what those kind of numbers look like for you all in terms of state funds earmarked for custodial services, which if you use a lot of money, reduce the number of people. No, so if you've already addressed some compression issues in that area, then you have eaten up an allotment that were state dollars, which creates another problem. And probably the big issue, I very familiar with custodial work, seriously. And what drove the district in that direction was exactly the retirement matching.
Yeah.
When you get retirement matching up in the 20% plus, when you're playing, you have to pay that to everybody. I mean, that's an incredible cost. So obviously, the problem in custodial services generally is finding the people to do the work. Custodial contract services are challenged with finding the people. And we all know we have trouble finding people.
Right.
Everybody has trouble finding people. So I am real curious why you think that bringing this in-house, that you're going to find the people that the custodial services people cannot find.
Yeah. I will say that finding people for all positions can be a challenge. But I will say that we have been working to hire, we keep trying to bring more schools in-house. I will tell you, over time, the cleanliness of facilities had deteriorated. I will tell you, over time, and this is not to criticize the contracted services, but schools that have had in-house services, we have the data to show their buildings are cleaner. I mean, just raw data. When you look at the standard set. So what we're trying to do is, as we think about our students and our staff, and they're saying we are not up to par, and we are working with our contracted services to continue to improve the services, but it is still not up to par. We do believe bringing in-house services would be a great answer. And I know that the benefits are more, and there's so many, but that is what the employees themselves are saying. We would love to come work for the school district. We know it's a bigger cost. It's not what we asked for last year. The total amount more a year would be 4.6? I don't know why that number's in my brain from Justin in our presentations. It's not 5 million. It's like 4 point something. So this would be, actually, that shows that it would be 5 million because of 2.7 on an annual basis. So that would be, there wouldn't be something more than that. It would be an annual basis of 5 point whatever million you just said. But that would be to bring all those employees in-house. To answer your question about could we find the employees, so we bought about 8 to 10 more schools in-house, some of our tier 3 schools that we really needed to prioritize the cleaning. And the schools, again, have been asking, can we please use our own custodians? When we have our own custodians, the building looks different. I think part of it's ownership. And we have some, don't get me wrong, we have some great custodians that are doing great work with our contracted company. And so we would hope, honestly, if this happens, that some of those would want to come on board with us and we would hire more. We are at community events all over the place. And there are folks that we have hiring fairs all over the place, and we have a lot of people show up to them. So I think, again, we wouldn't do this all at one time. We have a plan. If this is the direction we end up going that our Board of Education wants us to go, we've got a plan for doing it in phases, because to say we're going to take 15 schools at once, hire everybody, and make that transition would not be the smartest thing to do. But our team, Youssef and our custodial operations team, has a plan for how we could make this work. It is something in the big picture we want to do. So again, this would allow us to do that for half of a year this year, and then we need to figure out the sustainability. So, yep.
Trying to put in perspective, an item that has a 20% built-in cost without
with
doing
benefits.
a thing.
Yes.
And I guess I do understand if you've had a new company, and I take it in 6 months they haven't gotten the job done, and I felt, because I'm assuming you've only worked with them 6 months, you've got a contract with them. Are they doing all your contract service schools?
Yes. It's been a year. It's been about a year and a half that we've been together. So
you increased the cost last year to try to get them to do better, and they apparently have not.
Yeah, the increased cost was when we did the increased cost to start with a new company, because there were increased costs, salaries, benefits, supplies, materials, they were increased costs. So that was an increase to go with this contractor. So that was, I mean, yeah, there were increased costs to go with the contractor. So last year, was it, or no, I'm sorry, has this been the first full year of SSC?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, this has been the full year of SSC's work. No, it can't be. It was last year. I'm sorry. I cannot even, honestly, I feel like we've had them for a year and a half. Last year's increase was to support the increased cost. What?
Two budget cycles.
Come in.
No, you're thinking of the two budget
Fudging this up a little
Oh,
bit.
no,
here. So
ma'am,
what-
you're thinking of the two budget cycles.
Two budget, okay.
Whereas the contract has been a year.
That's right. Their contract is not July. I'm always thinking our fiscal year, July 1 to June 30. Their fiscal year with this contract is, like, we don't do them July 1. Is it a
They're more
December?
calendar type.
Yeah,
contract basis.
that's why I'm getting confused here. But yeah, so it would be a larger expense, we know that. We've had to weigh quality and cleanliness for knowing this would cost more for us to achieve that. Yeah.
And those are decisions that are up for you all to make
Yes,
with the
yes.
resources available.
Okay, understood.
Making a couple of points there. Last question, I'm done, is with a bus school radio upgrade.
Yes.
If you can't hear people, obviously, it usually has to do with signals, and usually has to do with low points on routes. That's everything, all those kind of things. Where our school buses go are a lot of some tough reception areas. And I'm just curious what your solution is, because radio per se may not do it unless you've got better networks that you can access. I'm curious who has promised that that's going to get fixed? Because I thought you just did a fairly recent upgrade with this program that sort of keeps track of who's on the bus and all that. I'm trying to remember I don't know the name of the vendor that does that, but they may not do the.
Oh, are you
radio part.
talking about the app that shows where kids are?
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
not your radio
That's not the
communication
radio.
system
No,
issue. Separate.
this is strictly that the radios, it's not, this strictly, and this came out of Jonathan, our security and safety team's request. This is not about like connectivity, reception. This is truly about the caliber of the radios, that they are not working properly. It's not about reception because you're in an area that reception may not be great. This is strictly about the age and functionality of these radios.
Okay, all righty. I'm done asking questions, and maybe others now.
And we'll
can-
get a lot of stuff back to you so that you can have even more answers.
Other questions? Jump. Yeah.
I've got about 5 or 6 minutes worth, so I'm low guy was a seniority poll. I think,
Go ahead.
go ahead.
That's fine. Okay. All right. Well, first of all, we have not had our budget presentation, so I have no idea. But there's two things I'd like to point out. Public health is our responsibility, and the nurses are our responsibility.
Okay.
And I think we do a really good job with that. Health and Human Services Board has requested additional nurses, so I think we can delete that. Not today, but could I get a percentage of your budget that is replacement for ESSER dollars? And
Yeah.
That's all I need to know right now.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Thank you, Dan. I guess you'll bring us on home with this in a proactive way. So first, let me say, thank you for coming to share this information with us so that we can work hand in hand with the school district to make sure that our students get optimal education is guaranteed to them in the state constitution, and also to support the great workers, our educators that, really make this happen. And I do want to recognize the school board members and community for being here to help us think through this, because that's exactly how, I sit up here hoping that we can all think through this together to make sure that Winston-Salem Forsyth County has the best school district in the state and even in this country. I'm just going to, out of the local funds budget request information, sort of highlight a couple of things on the request. And I think, Dr. Martin raised some good questions, but the few things that I want to elevate. One, the pre-K education, and back to Project Impact. Is there any involvement with Project Impact with literacy any longer with the school system?
No, no, the funds, their final funding as they closed have been moved in the direction of literacy. So they've gone to the foundation. Part of them have gone there. The closeout was, I think, about 300,000. It's gone to the Ed Foundation, our education foundation, for teacher grants focused on literacy. The other has gone to our teaching and learning team who are working with community members like Love Literacy and others on a on-grade level reading campaign. So all those funds, the leftover funds will support literacy.
Okay, because to my recollection, Project Impact did support some of the pre-K classes at one point. And obviously, if you're talking about literacy, if you're not talking about pre-K, why are you talking about it? Yeah. So I would have assumed that the Project Impact, if they were still viable, would be a great asset to leverage to try to meet the needs. But I didn't know how, because I thought it was a $20 million commitment.
Yeah.
And
They have sunsetted at the end of last school year. So the Project Impact Board has ended. And it was a big investment in the beginning, and that was used over time, and it was used for many things, but pre-K was one of those things, and supporting literacy efforts.
okay, thank you. So then the other question to kind of piggyback off of Vice Chair Wisenhunt with the additional 5 nurses and 10 social workers, I do hope that somehow the county and the school district can, synchronize on that effort so that, we can alleviate some of the burden on your side and, just to work in that collaborative spirit. But I would be interested to know how we are leveraging the telehealth component that I think Representative Lambert was key in trying to make sure Forsyth County was able to sort of pilot.
Yeah. We are working with telehealth and I can't remember, I think it's with, it's either with Novant or Atrium, but I will say that our School Health Alliance also is doing telehealth with some of our schools, plus the on-site clinics. So I will get you information about where we are with the telehealth work. I can get you what schools are being serviced through that. But yes, that grant did help us have several schools be able to take advantage of the telehealth.
So the grant had a life cycle. It has ended then?
I think it was a 1 year. So I'm not sure, actually. I'm going to need to tell you, like when we got those funds, I don't think it was like a continuous. I'm sure it's something we would probably have to find funding for. But I will get you feedback on that. I'll get you information on that.
Yeah, because I would think that if telehealth can help to also support the need for the 5 nurses, at least in some of the schools, and I know that it wouldn't be absolutely what we want by way of the 5 nurses, but I think at the end of the day, we're talking about something that can support the health issues that go on day to day in our schools, that if telehealth is at least still available, I would definitely, and I'm sure Dr. Martin, we would call, Representative Lambert and say, can we get that grant extended or get a chance to continue it with, in Forsyth County. The other piece I wanted to highlight is the master degree supplement. So, of course, everyone knows that the state for years supported the master degree supplement. So I applaud you guys for trying to take on a lift that, we have been advocating for the state to return. But nevertheless, if the state doesn't do it, then we have to try to take up, some creative ways to do what we know makes a difference as it relates to getting the best educators to, of course, serve our students. And so I was wondering that, in light of maybe we don't hit the mark, what is another way to try to meet the master degree supplement request? Have you all thought of maybe a merit-based kind of initiative. So, in other words, you have this tiered system. At Tier 3, you know that those are the schools that need the most highly qualified, most experienced. And maybe if the the master degree supplement was paid on, oh, if you want this supplement, you have to consider working in a Tier 3 school at so many years in order for us to continue the projection of academic success out maneuvering everybody in the state. And as Dr. Martin put it, we do a second home run because there is no osmosis consideration around how that happens. You have to have your most qualified, your most experienced teachers in those schools that need them the most. So when you show the documentation around, we do have a great experienced group of teachers, 6 to 30 years, but the question is, where are they? And I know that in looking at past data, a lot of those teachers are not in the schools that are at Tier 3. You have most of the ones that are least experienced. So you may be able to sort of, utilize a pool strategy to leverage the master pay piece. And it may not be exactly how you want it, but we may be able to say in Winston-Salem, Forsyth County, we do offer master pay, but it is based on, a merit kind of scenario because it's hard to fund it just right out.
Yep.
And so I would kind of maybe look at the data around where would your master teachers with great experience go? Where's the need in our district? And sort of try to maybe forecast what that expense would look like. I know, again, I would prefer just to give it all to the master pay because I was one of those teachers and I wanted my master pay from the state. It made a difference. I get it, Jenny. I see it. But, we're at the table of negotiation and compromise, and we may not get exactly what we want, but I want us to kind of think, out of the box to get us as close as we can. And I do think that low-hanging fruit of the classified additional 2% pay of $500,000, I truly hope that we can at least, figure that out here on the commissioners because I know that is long overdue, and I don't know. I know Dudley is thinking about his day in the sun with retirement, but. He is a master of helping us to figure out, our budget. But I do think that the classified additional 2% pay would be such a great win for our community to make that happen. So, I again to the community, help us to think through that. But I think there was maybe one more thing. Oh, the refresh. So when I was on the school board, there was a structured cycle for refresh.
Yes.
And therefore, we're on the cycle right now where it's time.
Yes.
So, and just so happened, it comes in with this. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm going to send you all that.
Thank you. And I do not have the background expertise and the details of educational budget planning that some of my colleagues have. So thank you for breaking out the additional requests in a way that helps me understand what I need to ask to be sure that I understand what you're asking for and why. There are probably 5 of the points that I have either a confirming or a clarifying question on. First, the school bus radio upgrade. If I'm understanding the nature of the request here, that would be one-time money. Is that correct?
Yes.
The teacher supplement's $5 million. As I understand from newspaper coverage, that was a judgment call made by a majority of the board and would involve using the total reserve balance. Funding that has already come in from the quarter cent sales tax.
So that is not what this request is. That is what we are doing, but this 5 million is in addition.
All right, so you want an extra $5 million in
Correct.
addition to, okay,
Yes.
all right. Let me correct my note then. And how did you calculate that?
We were trying to calculate what it would take to take us from our current supplement to be at the top. And so we looked at the two highest paid supplements in the state, which were Wake and Charlotte, and we looked at what we pay and what would it take to get there. It would take us about $2,000 more teacher. So we basically took what is in our current Article 46 reserve, and we're going to pay that out, and then we're going to sustain that with our budget over the coming years, and we're asking you all to do the same, to take 5 million, and then that would become something we sustain.
So this would have, for future budget cycles, something more than $5 million a year budget, ongoing impact.
So 5 million more, so if our budget were to go, say you said, out of all this, you want to give us 5 million more a year for so our budget would go from 163, that original budget, every year it would then be plus 5 million more, which would be able to be sustained over time.
But
Does that make
you're not going to start with $5 million in reserves built up.
We are doing that ourselves already. So going into next school year already, despite this, we have taken 4.6 million that's sitting in Article 46 reserve, in an account reserved. We are going to go ahead and distribute that to our teachers. That would give them an increased supplement, and that'll be for next year, but we are going to absorb that into our budget with other management of our funds in the future. That will be a 5 million, 4.6 reoccurring cost for us as a school system, but that would give our teachers an increased supplement of between $800 to $1,000.
So if that's 4.6, and what you would need to double that would be 4.6, is that correct?
I guess, give or take. It depends if the salary increases. It depends on other things. We rounded up to 5 million because there are other factors that could increase that. Is that
No, you're
correct?
exactly right. I mean,
So it's a roundup.
I do not understand with the pre-K education, whether you're talking about staff that is currently there
Yes.
that is funded through ESSER. So those, are you talking about 11 classrooms that are currently staffed and operating?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
And just to confirm, with the 5 nurses and 10 social workers, are you talking about existing staff that is presently funded through ESSER?
Correct.
Finally, the classified additional 2% pay. As I understand what you did last year, you were able to find within your budget funds for some additional classified staff supplemental pay.
Correct.
But you did not, and therefore you never took advantage of the $1 million that we set aside. And so as I understand it, that $1 million is still there. Is that correct, Dudley? It was in our budget. I mean, that was operational money. It wasn't one time.
Since they did not use it, we did not include that automatically in a base budget. Is that correct, Kyle?
It's not part of their 1/12 allocation, actually, so it will, we withheld that $1 million. It's in a budget reserve, and so we were waiting for the school board to come back with a plan on how it was going to be.
But it is not in, it
Right.
is not in the base budget right now.
But it's in a reserve.
Mm-hmm.
It's there.
It's in the current year's budget, yeah.
But it's also conditional, as a year ago, conditional upon a market survey, classified employees, and we don't have that yet.
Yes. And honestly, we do want to access those funds with a market rate study, bringing back, not the study, bringing back the actual what we would do with the $1 million. We should be at the point that we're able to bring that back in the very near future.
2020 as a kickoff point, and then going forward, yeah.
Yeah.
And comparing
So,
to other
yeah.
counties and school systems.
So, but
We're going to have a market, the market, let's get chicken and egg, market rate survey
Right,
first.
right,
chicken,
correct.
No,
Right.
Right,
Which
yes,
we will
so-
see.
Right, and we've seen your market studies that we have access to that have shown to compare to with when we have similar roles within our district and the county. So Tommy has looked at all of that, so we will be bringing that forward so that we can access that million, hopefully, if you approve that. We still would like to be able to do that, so this would be the local longevity, the 500,000, and then with that market study, that million would go back into classified as well. So we are still wanting to access those dollars.
well, my inquiry is whether, if the $1 million is in reserve, why you wouldn't have potentially 2 years' worth of this additional 2% pay if you justify through the information that we requested for the ask last year. And as I understand it, that money's available, can be accessed. It's set aside in a $1 million reserve, so it could provide 2 years' worth of your estimated additional pay here.
Well, so the difference is, this is a flat, I mean, you could do that, but this is a flat 2% across the board for all of our classified employees, every category. The market study would be a different approach that would show, like, just for an HVAC worker, what is the market rate for that person and where do we need to make increases of that? This 2% would just give all of them a flat increase of 2% pay. So I know what you're saying, like, if we have $1 million sitting there, but there are two different intentions
Two
between
different
those dollars.
approaches.
Yeah.
But what was the across-the-board increase in classified pay last year?
6%, right? 6%, I believe.
on average,
And then there were a couple of groups that got 8%, actually, and those were bus drivers, bus mechanics. I think those were the two,
All right.
and maintenance.
So that was good.
Yeah, that was a good increase. Again, we're talking about employees. The reason we want to keep making these increases are these are employees that are not paid at the highest rates of pay. And so like a 2% is not, 6% last year, 2% this year. Every time we can just keep adding to that, we'll continue to increase their bottom line for all of them.
All right. Just want to make sure I understand.
Yeah.
So what you're requesting would be 2% on top of the 6 to 8% last year?
Yes.
And in addition to what you anticipate requesting
For the market rate.
through the market rate incentive?
Yes,
All right. Thank you.
thank you.
Other questions?
The only question that I have, thank you, Tricia, for
Thank you.
this presentation today. It's very clear, very clarifying for me. The only question that I have is relative to the funding formula. Was this calculated into this budget?
The
Where are we
county
with the-
funding formula?
Yeah, where are we with our funding formula?
Yeah, we've moved away from that for,
Okay.
from history.
these
I
are
mean,
just numbers.
we can calculate it and share it as a baseline as we discuss it with you, but we are back.
And we did that last year.
Yeah, and we are back looking really kind of zero base
Okay,
their
so
budget.
yeah.
And they presented it in that way, and so the way they presented it was very helpful. And really, we met twice in pretty detailed sessions with them and dove pretty deep into it. So we've got a pretty good handle that, and I do feel like we can make a manager's recommended budget absent the formula based on what we learned, so.
Okay, that's fair. Thank you.
I wanted to make a comment. I need your math mind up here, Kami, real quick. But to answer, Commissioner Wisenhut, to answer your question, on this actual request, what was pre-funded with ESSER was the 1.2 million social workers and nurses, the computer refresh at 4.1, and the pre-K. So that's a total of 6.6. So when you think of that, the overall ESSER was 215 million. So now, when you look at our budget and what we were able to absorb by freeing up dollars, there were a few items I showed you there that we've absorbed, like mentors. So when you want to know the overall percent, do you want to know of this request or including things that we also figured a way to fund through our local dollars?
Yes.
Okay,
That's what I'd like.
all right, so, and I will say, because 6.6%, I mean, 6.6 million of 215, what is that, just without the other items?
46 would be about 45%.
No, no, no.
Is that on 40?
6.6 million out of 215
Oh, out of
million.
215, I thought you meant.
But you didn't spend 250 million in 1 year, I mean, 210 million in 1 year
We spent it in 3, but what the question was what percent are you asking to keep
of the total amount.
of the total amount? And so to me, it's not,
That'd be
it-
about 3% of.
Yeah.
At 215 million, 1%.
Almost
6,
exactly.
So you're at
okay.
6 at 30%.
Right, and so then the other items that we kept, so what we'll do is we'll add those in, and those would have been your, the front office bilingual at 1.2, and your mentors and care team at 1.2. So the total amount, those are the things we absorbed, or the things that we are continuing, because a lot of the other things were like, we spent a lot of money on resources, and we have had to find other ways, like we added those because we had those dollars, but some of those we are not continuing. So with that, 6.6 plus another 1.2 and 1.2.
So 2.4,
Mm-hmm.
which is another, it takes you from your 3% of the total ESSER to 4% plus.
To 4%? Yeah.
Any final questions?
I don't have a question. I just wanted to quickly clarify because I was asked about the merit piece. And I do understand that sometimes people from the outside will try to leverage and pit teachers against teachers with the term merit. What I want to clarify is that my terminology around merit is just from the basic definition of, as a teacher, I can put up, my high qualifications to go anywhere, and I would like to get, any advances that I could, what essentially is what the state did with the master pay, is based on the merit of you have another degree. So I mean it strictly
Yes.
from just a broad definition. I think working with the Forsyth County Association of Educators will be a great way to maybe think through, how to pull educators to some of the schools that need teachers that, have master qualification, years of experience, et cetera, however you guys would like to justify that. So I just wanted to clarify so that people don't try to utilize that to pit us against one another.
Yeah, no, and I totally understood. We always think of ways to incentivize your
Better term,
high-quality teachers
incentivize.
to go to your schools where they are really needed. And all schools need great teachers, but we have our Tier 3 and Tier 2 schools that need the very best. So you're just trying to say, if you can't do everyone, can you incentivize at least those going to Tier 2 and 3 schools or Tier 3 schools? I totally understood that, and that's a great alternative if we can't do the full, everyone. Yeah.
Thank you.
If there are no more questions, thank you very much. Good
Thank you.
presentation.
Thank you.
Good.
And you all do, well, you have this today, but you should have had one too the other day. So sorry it got to you so late. We tried to get it here, I think, Tuesday morning, but we probably should have emailed you. Next year, we'll email it to you. So thank you.
Good. Thank you all. Good. Courtney, got one little quick, we need to take a short break. And we'll be back, say, we'll do very best, about 6-7 minutes. Quick one. Thank you. thank you for your patience, Courtney. I'm sure hopefully you were able to get a little some other work done. We are pleased to hear your update today on kind of where we are, and we've gotten some emails from, I got a chart yesterday. I appreciate it. I had a few questions on the chart, but yeah, the floor is yours, and we'll ask questions, and I'm ready to go.
Okay, all right. Well, good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for having me, and it will be hard to follow that very informative and interesting school board update, but I'll do my best, so. All right, let's see. Going blank.
I'll preface it, when we were putting this together, there is a lot going on between the Utility Commission and the county across lots of different projects. And so we have, I think Courtney's done a great job of giving everybody an update on where things are, both in terms of projects and sort of policy issues. And
Problem. You're at the end
At
of the
the end.
PowerPoint.
Oh, yeah, we gotta get stuck. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you need to go to
It's kind of
PowerPoint. You need to go to
frozen.
the PowerPoint down here and then go to the first slide because it started on the last slide.
There we go. There we go. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Yes, as Dudley mentioned, there is a lot going on, so I'll do my best to get through and answer any questions that you may have. I'm going to start with a couple of capital projects updates for that we're doing for the county. The Tanglewood Business Park sewer extension, a study was performed on how to best serve the new business park or proposed business park and Southwest Forsyth Little League complex. The total estimated cost of this project is $2.7 million. Broken down, it's about $400,000 for engineering services and then $2.3 million for construction. The utilities contribution is estimated to be at $250,000 per our oversized main policy, which I'll get into a little bit later when I show the map. A request for qualification was advertised for engineering services in February, and Stantec was selected as the design engineer. Approval of an engineering agreement is on the agenda for Monday's Utility Commission meeting, and it's $196,000 for design, bidding, permitting, and bidding services. Again, I mentioned earlier $400,000 for total engineering services, so we'll have to bring another item back at some point for construction administration and inspection. So next step, start design of the proposed outfall. And here is a map that shows the impacted area for the new sewer extension. And you can see, I don't know if my pointer will show up for you guys, but we're coming out, the lift station's down here. There's already some sewer extended that's showing up in green right here. So we'll extend that a little bit further with an 8-inch line. That's the orange hash line. And then we will extend it this way. Can y'all see that when I point? Okay, you can. We'll extend it up to serve the Little League complex, 12-inch originally, initially, and then size it down to an 8-inch. So the oversized main policy will be the Utility Commission would fund the cost between the 12-inch and the 8-inch. That's what the oversized main
Courtney,
policy
is Topsider Homes or Poindexter or any of those other folks in that business park, are they connected to sewer now? Or do you know? I mean, I guess they
I
would
don't
be
think so,
served
because
by
I
that
don't know
line.
that we have sewer. Let's see. Well, we do look like we might have some in Idols. I'd have to check on that.
Okay.
Really, just to make sure.
But they'd be pumping into something. They need to give them a chance to go into gravity under.
Yeah, if they were, yeah.
Okay.
This map shows the gravity.
Yes, that is correct. That is correct. Okay, Highway 65 waterline extension, just a little bit of history on this one first. So the county applied for a community development block grant to extend water lines along Highway 65. Winston Forsyth County Utilities is going to administer the project, and ultimately, the water line would be conveyed to the city for ownership and maintenance once complete. In lieu of the CDBG, Winston-Salem received $3.1 million to fund this project with ARPA funds. It is federal funding, which does necessitate additional project requirements. And the design engineer was selected, and it's currently under design. So I don't have the best news on this one, and I know it's not going to make some of you happy, but I did have a direct and tough conversation with the design engineer for my frustrations with the slip in project schedule. Get into a little bit more of that at the end, but the construction drawings are complete, and they're currently the final drawings are being reviewed, and permitting has started. We do have to permit one stream crossing, and of course, we have easement acquisitions to get. The project is estimated to be advertised in July of 2024, and issue the notice of proceed in October of 2024, and estimated construction being complete next summer. What we're seeing across the board, and not only on this project, but for a lot of our projects, is that there is so much work going on that a lot of our engineers, the engineering community and consultants have taken on more work than they can manage. For this particular project, the firm lost 2 engineers that were working on the project, and they did not fill those voids as quickly as they should have. But we are seeing that across the board. Like I said, I had a very direct and tough conversation with the management team at Hazen. They did offer to come here and take some of the heat, but I'm here to answer any questions about this one, if you want to talk about it now or wait to the end.
I'm not happy. You knew I would not be
Yes.
happy. My concern is losing the funding. Do you think there's any way that you're going to have this completed in time to receive the ARPA money completely?
Yes, I do. And that is one, when we selected the engineer, that was part of it. They knew that it was ARPA funding. They knew there was deadlines. That's one of the requirements that we had when we went through the selection process. So again, we use this firm on other projects, and obviously if they're not delivering on this one, then that impacts, the opportunity for future projects. And they know that, and I made them aware of that. But we are pushing it as hard as we can.
Do your contracts have I'm sure they don't, but have you thought about having some penalty kind of clauses for inability to perform? Because these services are not cheap. This is not cheap work. So when an engineer is accepting that responsibility, if you can't deliver, then your fees they need to be taking some of this risk along with everybody else. And I would think in all the work and the projects you got now that it's kind of like a liquidated damages issue for failure to perform, and going in, this is a requirement, and by the way, for every month late, this is what happens.
Right. You're correct. We don't have anything on our engineering side. We do have it on construction projects, but I think you're right. Ultimately, engineers, a qualification-based selection process, and if their qualifications, if they haven't been performing on certain jobs, then it impacts them from getting future work. We could go with a different engineer. There's nothing that prevents us from saying you're not performing, we'll select somebody else. But at this point in the game, I don't know that would be any quicker, since the drawings are pretty much completed. But I understand exactly, and definitely will look into if that's an option for future projects. I will say that we are evaluating alternative delivery projects where we would do design build or CMAR or some other, and I'll talk a little bit more about that when I get to the Wahlberg lift station project, but it is an issue across the board that we're seeing.
Well, you might tell them if they want to take some of the heat, maybe they need to have a meeting with that neighborhood and explain to those folks why for years and years they have not had water, or either they're sharing wells that are going dry. And we have promised these people we would help them because they've never had the funds to hook up to water. So if they want to take some of the heat, I'd be happy for them to come and join a meeting with these folks.
Yes, I think that's probably a good idea to do that.
One question related to it. Because it's just one of your bullet line here's, because it is this kind of funding, does that make you have to do additional things that you wouldn't have to do if you were doing it under a normal process?
Yes, you do. With federal funds, there are additional requirements than if it was just our utility money that we have to meet with those type of fundings. That is correct.
So,
Like Buy American, there's different processes that we have to go. There's a different permitting steps that you have to take. So,
But they're getting paid for that.
yes, absolutely. All that
They're getting paid to do those
right.
additional requirements.
And all that was outlined up front. I mean, we knew from the beginning that this was going to be funded this way.
but because it is just these type of funds, it's just additional things that they require to be done, but under the normal process, the commission could do a project and you just don't have to go through and jump through these extra loops.
Right. And we have to take that into consideration when we're looking for funding. Obviously, if it's a loan with a low interest rate, you might want to look about, well, does that interest rate offset those additional requirements? But in this case, it's a grant. It's kind of, it's definitely, it's worth, going through those additional steps. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, to expand upon a point you made about liquidated damages.
May not be the right term, penalty. Go
No,
ahead.
you did. Yeah, we don't say penalties, it's liquidated damages, but you did use the correct term. I would just say that these are especially important in this case because if it goes beyond 2026, we will have to repay the money. And I know the date currently is 2025, but it has slipped a number of times. And so that's something that we really need to focus on, stout liquidated damages.
And absolutely, the construction contract will have those, yes.
Thank you, Gordon.
The next project is the Tanglewood Force Main relocation. So the existing sewer force main leaving the Tanglewood lift station has deteriorated and needs to be replaced. We evaluated 5 routes based on cost, length, and risk, environmental impacts, and property owner impacts as well. A route was selected, but after further review, we need to modify that again based on some wetlands. We determined that the route was going through wetlands and there was a historic wall that we needed to preserve. So we have been in communication with county staff about the new alignment and making sure that they feel comfortable with the new route. So field survey is underway to get that new alignment that we're looking at. Should be complete by the end of May. Easement acquisitions in fall of 2024, which we will need easements from the county going through Tanglewood Park. And then advertise this project for construction in spring of 2025. And I do have a map here, and I apologize for the map. When you have such a large project, you have to zoom out. But the Tanglewood lift station is here in Tanglewood Park, and so we would be taking it up Tanglewood Park Road, I think that's what it's called, and then coming down along Mallard Trail to Idols, following it all the way up Idols to Hampton Road, where it would go back into the existing sewer system.
Show them where that line is roughly now coming.
It goes through Clemens West. I don't know exactly, but this is Clemens West right up through here, so it cuts through like this way. And the reason we're not following back the existing alignment is there is some corrosive soils in that area. Obviously, a lot of impact to a lot of customers that way, since it's a very dense neighborhood. Correct. Correct. But that is where the existing line is, yes. Yes, that is correct.
I have a quick question on that, just from that map. It appears where the green line is near that, baseball field, it looks like it'd be a lot easier to connect the baseball field to that line instead of, that's a long extra run on our gravity line that's back on the first project we looked at. Looks like makes a lot more sense to connect there.
So that's a force main, and you can't connect services to a force main because it's pressurized. It would back up into the line.
Go back to that other chart real quickly, because really that Tanglewood Park project that was funded with some state money.
Oh, this one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
That one. That's got a long run to get to the baseball.
Yeah, but basically it serves every bit of, the purpose of that gravity line is to pick up the service lines from all that, as Tanglewood Business Park develops, you're basically putting the infrastructure in to serve Tanglewood Business Park when we, in some negotiations early on around access to the park, there is a board, we told Southwest Little League that we would,
I remember that.
Yeah, that septic tank is failing pretty badly, and so this project fixes Southwest Forsyth Little League, also provides gravity access to that Dillon Industrial Park, and is the future service lateral for the entire business park. And so it's a really important, big piece of infrastructure.
I think that was a good observation. The only difference is it's a force main coming from a lift station, so the pumps are pumping that flow back to a gravity line, and so it's pressurized, and you can't connect to it. They wouldn't be able to connect to that.
You'd have to put a wet well in.
Well,
basically,
you have to.
Somewhere.
Yeah, you have to connect to a gravity line. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Okay, so next project is the Southeast Forsyth new sewer lift station. So Forsyth County received $20 million from the state budget to expand water and/or wastewater services in southeastern Forsyth County. A site on Wahlberg Road has been identified as the best location to use the available funding to build a new sewer lift station. We talked about that in previous presentations. A request for qualification is being developed for design build services. This is, as I mentioned earlier, an alternative delivery method. We had advertised this project for a traditional design bid build, but after researching it more and listening to presentations and knowing what the county is looking for, and I think this would be a good opportunity to use this alternative delivery method. That way we can go ahead and build our contractor and engineering team up front. We know exactly what the budget is, and they can tell us what we can get for that money. We kind of go ahead and can procure pipe or whatever. I just think it'd be a better process. So we'll be moving forward in advertising for that.
That's good. That's moving faster.
Yeah. And this is just a map that shows kind of the proposed area where we would build a new pump station. It's the square down here, gravity, sewer lines, and then the purple is a proposed alignment for the force main. So that moves me into this next map, and it shows the growth management areas and potential utility expansions. So my team, as well as Chris Murphy and his team and Kyle, have looked at potential sewer expansions in the county. We looked at the growth management areas. We looked at where the Beltline is going and will go. The blue area here is the proposed service area for the new Wahlberg Road that's funded, Wahlberg Road lift station that's funded. Over here in
Point that out again.
right here. I know, and again, the scale is hard because you're trying to show big picture.
I see it down
Yeah.
there. Okay, got it.
So the blue is like the sewer basin.
Yeah.
And then the star is,
Got it.
the lift station. Here on the west side of the county, southwest, is the new Idols Road lift station that I talked about earlier, where we're expanding sewer out of, for the proposed Tanglewood Park Business Park. And then over here in Louisville is actually, we're working with Louisville to fund a new lift station that they're building to expand service area for the area around the Great Wagon Road. So we've got that going on as well. And then all these other red kind of basins are potential, areas that we could expand. One of the areas here does not have a star on it because we feel like we could expand gravity sewer in that area without needing a lift station.
And the star means,
A star is a lift station
okay,
that would
I got it.
need to be added.
Yeah, so just a reminder, this project really bubbled up from a winter work session a while ago where we had a conversation about how the Beltway would potentially impact in some advanced planning around, does it open up areas for potential development? And so Courtney's work here was to say, what is the low spot how do you identify a sewer shed where the low spot, you could put gravity lines in and it would, if you were in a perfect planning world and you said, this will develop out, this is where you would put that infrastructure. And it actually tied into the work that Chris is doing around the comp plan update that's going on. And so, the important policy discussion for this board and for the city board and Louisville and everybody else is, okay, here's a roadmap. If you build it, they'll come. Do we promote growth? And so it's really part of a pretty important future discussion. But I appreciate this work because this had to be done to say what's logical around expansions, and then the hard question about do these areas need to grow? Is this part of what Chris talks about when he goes out and gets community input around how growth would occur and so on and so forth? So,
Yeah, it's a good planning document for us and maybe even to ask for potential funding in the future, so.
Yeah, and it seemed, I really appreciate that work, and it seems like prioritization of those, you've got 6 circled areas there, kind of which ones would be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Obviously, the gravity drain, 1.
Yeah, that was.
And probably on the south, on the northeast side, probably those next 3. And the waiting for the bypass over there, that's 20 years away. That one can sit, probably, and wait. But those others probably are very worthwhile and beginning to get some kind of wild kind of, not straight line, but some line, got kind of a rough estimate of what you're talking about in today's dollars and inflate it by a huge amount so that, the opportunity to make requests for more expansion will close, in my opinion. It's going to close. And we ought at least get on the list.
Yes.
And be making that. And if those are priorities and some timelines and so forth, that would important because your presentation so far has indicated how long this takes.
Yes.
This is a long process.
It is a long process.
So the sooner we start trying to line up, if there, to the extent state money is available, we need to be doing, I think, everything we can, and that's a good way to start. And I know that, I know Kyle Haney's worked on a project to look not just at this, but kind of a overall, it just ties right into it. It ties right into the project. He's got some bid specs on more economic development kind of review consulting work. And then we've got this issue that I assume you're going to also talk about in the King issue. That's another piece of this puzzle here.
Well, that certainly is, but I don't have it. I can answer any questions regarding that. I don't have it on my slides, but.
Mr. Chairman, we do, but the one thing I do want to say is I think that, again, a lot of our stuff does dovetail together, and when we get to our presentation, we will talk about priorities as part of the future growth management area plan for Forward 2045 and talk about King.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Okay.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Please.
I'd like to clarify from the standpoint of the City County Utilities planning staff. Has the staff yet proposed lift stations for any of the 6 up around the top side, basically, yet?
No, the funding for that has not been included in any capital plan that we have.
And maybe even further, it's actually a departure from utility commission sort of practice around around, really around serving outside the basin
Right.
is a big, so this is a huge policy question to the Utility Commission because it would serve outside the basin, and it gets into what they haven't done, which is really promote development from the Utility Commission perspective. It's always been dependent upon developers.
Right.
Or state money or some municipal action to do that. And so it's a really interesting time with respect to that. So,
Yeah.
And I know that Chris is going to get more into this, but I just want to confirm something that I was intrigued to learn. I was first asked about the proposed King expansion, basically, which would end up kind of hopping over Tobaccoville into an area that for which King has no annexation authority. And when I asked you about what was going on there from a city county, no one had informed the city county utilities
Right.
department about that
Right.
ongoing request. So it was,
That is correct. Yes, that's correct.
all right, thank you.
Go.
Ready? Okay.
Good.
Okay, so policy regarding private water and sewer systems. I did send a memo to Dudley, and I'm assuming that it got shared. And this was a follow-up to a meeting that we had back in March with representatives from the county, the city, and the Utility Commission. Just talk about a number of things, and this was one of the issues that was brought up. But we're seeing an increase in development, obviously, as we've talked about, outside of our service area due to the lack of available sewer. And several of the new developments require sanitary sewer lift stations. In the past, our policy, the utilities policy, has been not to accept new lift stations, really to make sure that we keep a manageable number of lift stations that we can manage. We have 45 total right now that we have to maintenance and own. Therefore, developers are building private systems. So they're basically building the lift station that they need, and ultimately the collection system, so the sewer piping associated with that subdivision, and they're making it private. What I'm understanding is that there's been increased complaints to the elected officials from customers because the utility costs are going up. So basically, these subdivisions have their own little private utility. So their HOAs are paying for the cost to hire operator and responsible charge and maintain that system. And then they also are paying a sewer fee to the Utility Commission or to utilities because they're a customer of ours. They connect to us and we treat their sewer.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
But the billing question I have on that is that, do you treat that, you're not sending the bill to the individual homeowners, you're sending the bill to the sewer, to the manager.
To the HOA.
The management company.
Right,
or
to the management company.
And then is the rate that they pay based on a volume of effluent that leaves? Or what is it based,
So in most cases, it's based on, we serve water in that area. So most of it, we charge them on water consumption because, all that water is coming back to us through the sewer system. So they're charging the fee, or we're charging them a fee of what we treat based on their water consumption.
So a subdivision that has long time been connected to the sewer system, basically the customers are paying the same thing?
Yes, so they're paying a bill to us, and then they're paying whatever that homeowner association has to pay for the internal maintenance of their system.
But the issue is for...
To the private utility, whoever, could be Aqua, or could be, there's different.
But what I'm trying to get at is more, it seems to me that in the private utility, they've accepted the risk and the management of whatever to work for the homeowners association and do that. Whereas you have, as a utility commission, you have no risk on maintaining that lift station, nor the lines that run it, and you didn't put them in to start with.
Correct.
So your recovery on investment, you have no investment there.
Yeah,
But it seems to me the investment you have is, I look at it as the pro rata amount of the sewer issue, because I do understand from a simplistic standpoint billing, and I know the models exist for billing water and immediately tying into sewer. I kind of understand, but it has nothing to do with real cost. It is not related to real cost.
Well, it is, they are treated, that subdivision is treated like any of our other customers.
Exactly my point.
Right, and so they-
Exactly my point, because you don't have the liability of maintaining those, whereas you do have the liability in one that is totally managed by the Utilities Commission.
Well, yes and no, but I think we do have liability wherever they connect. We still are taking that, we're still taking that flow from, say if it's up in the northern part of the county, we're taking that flow all the way through our collection system
Yes,
and all the other lift
And to the
stations.
extent that they're using that piece of it, you're exactly right. Recovery makes sense. But your billing's not, it is not sensitive enough. It is not sensitive to those issues. Because from the developer standpoint, they're going to sell the houses cheaper if they have cheaper sewer. So for example, a homeowner that buys it pays less because they're not buying the fancy sewer, but they're paying more in the long run to take care of it. And it seems to me that a balance it seems to me there is a balance in what the real liability is for the Utility Commission versus the liability that the Aquas or the Everwho of the world, the management companies, because the issues we hear complaints about were the ones that were built by HOAs, and then they had a 20-year life kind of deal, and then all of a sudden, there's nobody there, this repairing, it becomes a crisis.
Right.
Whereas one of these big companies that are actually, I'm assuming they're in it for the long haul, and that they would be, this is going to be, they're accepting, they're charging sufficient amounts to replace their infrastructure.
Right.
So that's a little different than the old subdivisions that are now turning 25 and 30 years old and are having failures and homeowners holding bags that they don't know anything about. It just seems to me what I know about this, you can write on this little tablet I got right here. I don't know much, but big picture, there's some subtleties in models that they may be able to coexist in a way that whereas it deals with liabilities, and I'm looking at a homeowner, and I'm looking at the very issue of, should I be paying, if I'm also paying a HOA that did this, why should my sewer cost the same as somebody that you all have full liability for?
Yeah, and I think so we can definitely have our financial consultant kind of run that. I don't know of any other utility in the state that would have a different model. I think it would be so nominal, it would not be a big difference because we're still maintaining to add, we have over 4,000 miles of water and sewer pipe in the system. So to add, a little bit more for a subdivision, it doesn't really change our overall cost for that particular community.
Yeah, Don, think of it, the issue with pulling a private utility in to serve a 200-unit subdivision is that private utility has to capture the entire cost of those 200 customers within that. If you look at it, the reason why you would want to limit that is because we can spread that cost off across lots more customers just for that lift station. Because it is expensive to hire a certified operator to come out and look at one lift station and to make sure that thing's running all the time and just the amount of liability in there. And so, if you take Abington, for example, that subdivision, the private utility billed separately to that private utility. The calls that we get are, a customer on a utility commission customer that lives adjacent to them is paying, $70 every 2 months, and they're paying $200.
You're paying twice that. Yeah.
Yeah, and part of that is the bill structure, and part of that is the liability piece.
That's right, because Heater's only able to divvy up their cost across that fewer number of people, and so we're a better long-term deal for them.
I understand all that. This is
We can dive into those
we need.
I understand what you're saying. I just don't know that the true cost of service is going to change that much for somebody, because we do have wholesale rates. For example, King, Davie, Stokesdale, Greensboro, they all have their own system, and we either treat their wastewater or provide them water. And the true cost of serving them, even though they have another utility to maintain on the other side of that meter, is really not that much less than it would it cost for our inside county customers, if that makes sense. But I see what you're going with that, but.
Not exactly, because I think the cost is not linear. I mean, the cost is not, for every foot of line or whatever, for whatever, everything is not the same. And it is an infrastructure piece, and there are times that you got to ratchet it up, and you have to have capacity. I mean, there are a number of variables, but those variables are not a linear charge. I mean, kind of.
If I may, Mr. Chair,
we're sorry.
I hear where you're going, but I think that there are a couple things that doesn't take fully into account. I think it would be a misguided incentive for us to offer the water sewer services to that subdivision that's, has been built outside our natural service area and is relying on a privately installed and maintained lift station. We don't want to give them a price break and incentivize building outside the gravity flow area with that. It's basically sort of bad planning from an environmental standpoint. And
I'm not talking about price breaks. Go ahead, keep going.
Well, if you recalculate their fees on the basis of the assumption that they're not utilizing all the services, you're going to in fact build in probably a very small, but a slight price break to them that, to the extent it's enough to make any difference, would be encouraging them to kind of leap over developable areas that are potentially gravity fed into the area that's not.
And I do understand that point. That's an excellent point.
And the other thing is that statewide, and I remember this from my time serving on the Environmental Management Commission as chair of the Water Quality Committee, these small private lift stations are notorious for having a higher failure rate.
Yes.
And it's kind of a natural outgrowth of the fact that, in sizing and locating designing the lift station, it's purely on a cost profit basis, as opposed to, when you've got a public entity like our City County Utilities Commission, it's looking at the longer term and the bigger picture. And so you're more likely to get a system that is at higher risk of failure, like the case that we were dealing with just last year, where the lift station was in the floodplain. It was designed to fail almost, not intentionally, but foreseeably. And we're more likely to get that kind of problem with these private lift stations. So we don't really want to encourage them. We have to deal with them,
Right.
but we don't want to encourage them.
I got you. Yeah.
Okay.
But thank you for that, and we'll follow up a little bit more.
But Courtney, the bottom line is, right now, we do not have a policy addressing this.
Yeah, so right now, if a new lift station is required to serve a new development, we're saying you need to make it private. And we've researched what other utilities are doing, and I think we might be the anomaly on that. Greensboro and Raleigh, they require any new lift station, they do not allow a private lift station to connect to their system unless it's built to their standard and conveyed for any subdivision, so residential property. They allow it for a single-use property, so like a hotel or.
I understand that, but I'm saying we do not have the policy right now.
Correct.
And our standards, I looked at the standards chart, which I thank you for providing that, because I've asked that, and I really appreciate that. But I sent you a follow-up literally last night email that really gets at the issue of, because all of the other comparable ones in the chart allow PVC with no qualifications. Now, my guess is there are some
Yes.
qualifications, but they weren't listed in your chart.
Yes.
We allow it with a particular qualification, I guess force mains, small force mains. But that was my question to you, is that in their PVC allowances, what kind of qualifications do they have? Because if they're allowing PVC, for example, in Charlotte, which they appear to be, then you can make it, then some of our people probably wouldn't be complaining about it.
Right.
And I know that this kind of gets back to Commissioner Bessie's point, big picture, kind of, of the infrastructure and whatever, and when you take it down to a microcosm, of the little guy, it's, it ends up, well, it's okay for the big picture people, it's not so okay for those that are developing.
Right.
So I think we're trying to get apples to apples, and I still don't think that the chart that you sent us, if that's apple to apples, it has PVC in every single other one except us.
So
The qualification.
I did get your email, and I did respond, but you may have not seen it
I have
yet.
not. I actually checked to see if I had, and I didn't see it. Well, I
did
didn't.
you? Okay.
I mean,
Maybe it didn't
literally,
go
I checked
through,
it
but hopefully.
in our break.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay,
So that's
did
how-
anybody else get it? I sent
Well,
it
I
last
just didn't
night,
see
maybe it didn't go
And
through.
maybe I didn't get far enough down. I didn't spend a lot.
We,
I was walking.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, so so to try to answer your questions that you emailed about, so the listed materials were what is, from when I went to each utility's technical standards and specifications, those were the allowable materials. That does not mean that those materials can be used in every application. So for example, Charlotte listed several, but I can tell you that PVC would not be allowed in high pressure areas. For water lines, they would not be allowed for deep installations where it's really deep. A lot of times they're not. I spoke to my counterpart in Davie County this morning. They allow PVC and ductile. They don't allow PVC under sidewalks. They don't allow it in floodplains. They don't allow it under pavement. So there are still a lot of restrictions, even though that may be an allowable.
That's what I wanted to know, what they were.
Yeah, and so I didn't read through all of Charlotte Water's manual. I can dive into that to see, when each of those materials are allowed. But ductile is a superior product, especially on the water side, because water lines are pressurized. And so they just have a higher pressure rating.
And I got that. In fact, on the water side, I really didn't have any question. Nobody allows PVC on the water side.
Yes. And so on the
But it was on the sewer side.
on the sewer side, and that's
it was
correct.
Very
And
different.
And I did mention this to Dudley. We are looking to entertain opening up and allowing PVC in more applications for sewer. So that is something that our staff is talking through, and I think potentially a very good chance that we will be adding that as a acceptable, allowable material on the sewer side.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask a couple questions?
Please.
Courtney, since you brought up, it might not have been a good idea, but I won't spend much time on it. Your plastic pipe,
Yes.
that thick plastic pipe, just get ready for it because you're going to be around long enough that it's coming.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I read a lot of stuff about it, and there may be some certain situations where they won't use it because of the higher strength of the metal type pipe now, but there's going to be more widespread use of that type. When you say plastic pipe, it's not just a little thin stuff.
They
It's
make
stuff
it
that's about a half-inch thick.
Yeah.
So get ready and remember me whenever that comes along.
I think we're getting close, and that's one thing that wasn't captured in the memo. But just as recent as yesterday, we have scheduled a meet. Well, we first want to reach out to our field staff. So the crews that are actually in the field that are installing this pipe and working with this pipe, we wanted to make sure that they felt comfortable if we did expand our material to include plastic, and they are open to it. So we have scheduled a meeting to look at our specifications and add that actually on the sewer side. So I think we're getting close. Technology for plastic pipe has come a long way, and so we need to be mindful of that.
To this slide that you have up now, is there more detailed work that needs to be done on it, or is most of it done. The reason I asked that question, because we're not going to get this, if this needs some more work done on it, then we're not going to get that fixed today.
Yeah. You're right. And so what I guess kind of next steps are that we are recommending that we do put a policy in place that says for any new single-family development, you cannot connect a private system to us. And so that is in line with a lot of our peers. Ultimately, you know, the county commissioners and the city council have delegated authority to set policies to the utility commission. So ultimately, they would be the one that adopts a policy, but we are asking for each of those boards' support of the policy. I do have a meeting next week, I believe it is, with the development community. It's the next development quarterly forum. Thank you. And so it's on the agenda to discuss. And so we do want to have a collaborative conversation with them and let them know, kind of where our head's at and get any comments that they have. If they hear that maybe we're going to allow PVC, maybe they won't be happy. But I do want to mention that my last bullet point here says developers are currently building to our standards all the time. And so really the only time, and they're conveying it to us for new subdivisions, we add about 10 miles of water and sewer miles every year. So there's a lot added to our system every year. The only problematic thing that we've had in the past is when a lift station's been involved, and that's what's kind of triggered the issue. And if we open that up, or we're going to take those on, then I think the issue would go away. So any other?
This is helpful. I appreciate all your work on it, and I appreciate we're working on it. We're continuing to work on it, because all of us, we've had a tend to sometimes kick that can down another. We'll come back and talk about that in another 6 months.
Right.
So I appreciate you sticking with it. Good.
Yep, and my last slide, and this is kind of off topic from everything else, but I did just want to point out that even though I present a lot of capital projects to this group on a regular basis, I do want to say we have a lot that goes on the utility. As I mentioned, we maintain over 4,000 miles of water and sewer pipes, so our crews are always constantly out in the public and dealing with main breaks. We did have a water issue recently in the Buena Vista area that you may or may not heard about, but two valves on a 16-inch water transmission main were leaking that we had to fix. And a 16-inch main is really a large main that gets water from the plants to the pump stations, and then the smaller lines come off of that to serve your homes and businesses. So isolating that line was a huge challenge. We did have several customers that experienced low water pressure, while we were trying to get that fixed. But repairs have been made, and that should say, and water has been restored, so not, and work has been restored, so that's a typo. But I also wanted to show you this picture, because right here is a picture of a ductile iron pipe, and that pipe was installed in the 1950s, so it's 70-plus years old, and that pipe looks good, okay? So that's one reason why we like that material. And I will say the failure was actually on the valve, so it was a mechanical failure, not actually on the pipe. So anyway, just a little plug, I guess, for the material that we specify. That's my last one. Any questions for me?
Got it. Any other questions?
Just a comment. At first blush, I think the idea of moving to requiring that the lift stations be built to standard and then transferred to the city-county system is a good one. I think it would result certainly in better, more reliable service to those subdivisions in the long run, and probably at reduced cost.
Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Courtney. Appreciate your patience waiting today, too.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you.
I would suggest that we start at 2 with we'll begin with you, Chris.
Mr. Chairman, I think Chris's comments are pretty limited, right?
Nothing's limited.
Okay. I stand corrected.
An update on Forward 2045, so Amy has about 15 slides on
Okay.
what we've done.
All right.
2 o'clock sounds good. That's great. Well, we will adjourn until 2. Thank you.